Hi everyone, welcome to this video. Now this video is going to be very different from every other video on my page, and that is because I am going to be talking about a very important topic, especially for SAP beginners. Some SAP beginners find this topic very difficult to understand and a little bit confusing. So I'm going to tell you a little story about myself. Now, in my early SAP career, I remember having difficulty with this particular transaction code. Honestly, I do not know why I had issues with this topic. I feel because of the term code and maybe the term transaction, but I know I always had this cringy feeling whenever I heard the term transaction code, okay? But as years went by, interfacing with these transaction codes, using them every time I wanted to take on a particular transaction on SAP, I began to realize that it wasn't really of a big fuse entirely. All right, so that is why I have brought together this video so that I can be able to explain to you what SAP transaction code is and possibly answer some of your many questions on transaction code. Now, first of all, we're going to start with defining what transaction code means, and then we're going to also look at the characteristics of these codes. We're also going to see how this code differs per the versions of SAP. Yes, the versions of SAP. All right, and we are also going to see how to navigate these codes, how to find these codes, every single code on SAP on the SAP system. At the end of the tutorial, I would also give us links to some documents that will contain some important transaction codes for you to familiarize yourselves with them. So let's go. So let's start with explaining what transaction code is. For me, I feel like transaction code explanation is one of the simplest explanation you could ever imagine. Now, transaction code is simply an alphanumeric code. So I want you to try to imagine a code having a series of alphabets and numbers put together. This is simply an alphanumeric code, okay? And what it does is to try to link these codes to different transactions. Like on every module on SAP, they all have their transaction codes. For instance, in SAP PM, we have transactions like create order. We also have other transactions like order completion. And all of these transactions, they are useful for SAP PM. So what this transaction code does is to link itself to these transactions to sort of create a shortcut for us to be able to carry out our transactions properly. So I have this transaction code over here. So this is one transaction code, and I'm going to try to experiment, okay? Now let's use this particular short code. We're going to put it on the search button, and we're going to see how long it's going to take in comparison with if we use the description for the transaction code. To see that using the short code, we spent 4 minutes 57 seconds. All right, but using the description, we spent 4 minutes 42 seconds. So you can now see that it takes more time when you use your description compared to when you use the shortcuts. All right, so I want us to look at differences in this transaction code in terms of the versions of SAP. Now, I don't know if you have seen this type of display sometimes when you go on YouTube to watch some SAP videos on practicals. And for some of us that already have SAP on our systems, possibly at work, when you get to work, you could then try to compare it and you're like, I don't think this particular SAP video is making use of the SAP I know. Yes, he is making use of the SAP you know. The only difference is he uses the SAP ECC and your company makes use of the SAP S4HANA. And there are differences. Now, the SAP ECC is much like the older version, and which SAP wants different organizations to move to the SAP S4HANA, which is an improvement to the SAP ECC. Now, there are various characteristics that the SAP ECC has that this SAP S4HANA has sort of modernized, and one of it is these transaction codes. So when you hear the word transaction code, it is only common with the SAP ECC. All right, for the SAP S4HANA, we use something else. But before we go into that, I want to explain. Now you can see the two display here. For SAP ECC, it has a different display. Okay, but for SAP S4HANA, it has a different display also. SAP ECC makes use of the display GUI, which is the graphic user interface. But for SAP S4HANA, it makes use of the UX, which is the user experience. Now, the main reason why this change was made is to make us have a more friendly environment when we are transacting. Like if you look at this older version for the ECC, you can see that it's more in a list format. And you would agree with me that if I want to find a particular transaction, I would have to start dropping these arrows down from this arrow to this arrow. So it's going to really take a lot of time. For me, I feel that is why they even had the transaction, the T codes, to help to reduce the time that you would use in scrolling through all of those steps looking for a particular transaction code. Okay. But for the S4HANA, there is nothing like transaction code there. It has a user experience display, all right, and it makes use of the Fiori app. Also, there is one wonderful feature that S4HANA has also done, okay? It has helped us to be able to customize the particular transaction that I want to use.
Now, in customizing our homepage on S4HANA, what we are trying to do is to select the particular transactions that we use frequently, and then we are attaching it on a group or possibly on my home page. And the reason why we do that is to give us quick access. Like I said, on SAP ECC, we have our transaction codes where we practicalized it. We saw that when we use our transaction codes, it gives us whatever we want faster as compared to putting in the description on the search button or trying to search it one after the other, bringing down those structures. All right, so for S4HANA, we are going to see how to attach these particular transactions that you use on your home page, all right, or creating a group for yourself so that you can be able to easily access this. Now, this is how the SAP S4HANA environment looks like in comparison with the SAP ECC. Now, the S4HANA has tiles. Okay, so all of these are tiles. This one box, the second, the third, the fourth, they are all called tiles. All right, so what we are going to try to do now is to attach a particular tile to my home page, so that anytime that I want to use that particular transaction, I don't need to start going to my app finder, which is over here. This is my app finder here. So whenever I want to use it, I don't need to go to my app finder to start looking for a particular app. All right, I can easily just go to my home and I click on my transaction. So for the sake of this tutorial, we are going to look at the display customer balance. okay, which is a sales transaction, depending on the module you're using. If you're using a maintenance module, SAP PM module, a sales module, whatever module that you're using, all right, you can customize the transaction in a particular way you want to use it. So I'm going to click on my app finder and I am going to look for the display customer balance, because for me, let me assume that the display customer balance is a transaction that I use on a daily basis, and I would not want to start going through the issue of looking for it. So I'm going to search in my catalog for display customer balance. Okay, so we're going to look for it here on our catalog, and I click the search button. Now this is the display customer balance, and the reason why this is pinned is because I had previously pinned to my home, but because of the tutorial I'm going to pin it again. So this is the display customer balance. So what I'm going to do is to click on this add tile, this pin over here. So if I click on it, it tells me to add the tile. So I want to add this particular tile, so I click on the tile, and then it takes me to all of these groups. All right, so previously we already have groups that have been created before. We have the cash position, we have the current setting, the master data. They are all groups, but which group do I want to place it in? I want to put it on my home, which is the group that I have actually created to put all of this. So I click here. I want to see this tile on my home. All right, so when I click it, I close it. Okay, so now it tells me that it has been added to my home page. Okay, so what I'm going to do is to go back to the main page, and I'm going to search for my home here. Okay, so you can now see that here on the home, this is where it is. So we have attached it here. All right, so we've attached it. So it means that anytime I want to transact with the display customer balance, I can always come here and access it. Now if you look at the difference between these two, you can see that I added some description to it, and I also added the transaction code to it as well. So the transaction code on S4HANA for this display customer balance is FBL5. So I'm also going to show us how I added this transaction code here. So let's go back. I go back here, I click my app finder, and I'm going to search in my catalog display customer balance. Okay, now this is my display customer balance. So I double click on it. All right. So when I double click on it, it takes me here. I drop this down, and you see where it says save as tile. Okay, so I click here, save as tile. Now at this place we can see that we have a title here, which is the display customer balance, and we also have a subtitle. So I'm just going to copy this. I'll place here. Okay, and I need a description. They said enter tile description, so I might just need to put the code FBL5, which is this. It depends. If you want to put it, it's fine. If you don't want to put it, it's fine. So I click save. Now tile created. So I'm going to go back to my home. I'll go back to my home so that we can see what we have done. Okay, so this is it. Now you can see the difference between the previous one we created and this one. So the previous one doesn't even have a description under. So it depends on what you want. It depends on how you want to identify it. Okay, because the main purpose of doing this is just to make it very easy for you. So main looking at this, I can see that the transaction code is FBL5. And if I want to transact with the display customer balance, I can always come to my home and I click. Another thing I can do is to create another group. All right, like if you look at this manage commodity specification, this was a group that was created. Okay, and then under the manage commodity specifications, we can now see for customers and for supplier. So the intention of doing this was to put the manage commodity specifications together under a particular group. So when I want to transact with my manage commodity, I can just come here and this is it, and then I can click. So I'm also going to put us through on how to create this group. Let's create a group together. Okay, so we are going to create a group called the manage commodity specification. And even if I have created it before, for the sake of this tutorial, let's do it again. So we take our cursor here to the app finder and we'll click on the edit home page below the app finder. All right, and when we click on it, it takes us to this place, and so we look for where we can see the add group, the icon add group. So here we can see the add group icon here. So it tells me to enter a group. When I click on it, it tells me enter a group name. Okay, so I enter my group name, which is the manage commodity specification. Now my group is created. Now if you look at this group we created, you can see it has an empty tile here. There is nothing attached to it. So this is the tile. Okay, so we're going to use the app finder to look for related managed commodity specification transactions so that we can attach to the group. All right, because you can't have an empty group. You need to have a tile attached to that group. Okay, so I'm going to click on the app finder and it takes us to search in catalog. Okay, so I'll click manage commodity specification. So we're going to find these transactions here on the app finder. All right, so when I'm done with that, I'll click the search button. So here we can see we have two managed commodity transactions here. We have the one for supplier and for customer. So I'm going to click on this pin button over here. It says when I click on it, it tells us that this particular transaction has been added to the group. All right. So I'm going to click on the second tile over here. So when I click on it, it tells us the same thing. So let's go back and see what we have done. Let's look for our group and know if we were able to do it well. So I'll go back to the home. Okay. And now we have this already. So we have our group already called the manage commodity specification. And then we have the tiles that have been attached to it. All right. So the main reason for doing all of this is actually to make it very easy for yourself by creating shortcuts on S4HANA, because it takes a while trying to find transactions on the app finder, especially when you don't even know the particular transaction you're looking for, and then typing it on the transaction descriptions, So you can do this on your own module. For every module, you can customize your group, you can customize your home page. For example, on your PM module, we have order transactions. We have a transaction, we have I'm sure we are aware of the create order, the change order, the display order. So we can create a group called the order, and then we can then attach the associated tiles for create order, change order, and display order for it. So you can play around with it, make it flexible. The main essence of doing this is just to make the job easy for yourself. So let's see how we can navigate T codes on SAP.
Now, SAP has a total of 10,000 transaction codes. That is so much for SAP ECC. And for me, I feel like it is very impossible to have in your head all on transaction codes, but it is still possible for you to familiarize yourself with the transaction codes that your particular SAP module uses. All right. Now, for end users, super users, end users, the only issue that we normally have when we have ECC being converted to S4HANA in our company, the only concern that some users always have is, how would I be able to make use of my transaction codes? Because if you are saying that for ECC we use transaction codes, and in S4HANA I then begin to use my Fiori app, how can I be able to survive this? All right, because when this particular change is done, if for instance your organization changes from ECC to S4HANA, all right, you would agree with me that some of these transactions are going to change. I mean, the descriptions, they are going to change. Let me give you one example. We have one transaction code called the VA01. All right, and on ECC it has a transaction code VA01, which means create sales order. So let me say you are an end user, all right, and you normally make use of this particular transaction code in creating your sales order, and then your company comes with the idea of moving to the S4HANA. This actually becomes a problem for you, because it will take you some time to be able to know what is the corresponding transaction that is going to be replacing this transaction code on SAP Fiori. So for on SAP Fiori, this particular create sales order is being replaced as sales order. Okay, so all of this is very easy to find. It is very easy for you to be able to find all of these transactions that have changed on SAP, and I'm going to teach us how this is done.
Real quick, we are going to see how to pull out the list of all the T codes that is changed on SAP ECC. Now, there are several times that we've seen people input transaction codes and have error messages like it does not exist. Okay, now in situations like this, it simply means that that particular transaction code used on SAP ECC has been changed. So on SAP S4HANA, it is going to have a different description. So we are going to look at how to pull out the list of the whole T codes so that you can better know which one has been changed and which one has not been changed. To do that, you are going to go to your search button and input SE16N. Okay, then you execute. I have the maintenance view existing for this database already. All right, but for you, you would have to input the PRGN underscore CORR2 on the database. All right, which is simply the correction table for the modification transaction codes. All right, so you're going to then input your SAP release. So the code for SAP release is 751. Then you execute. Now, you can see that we have our release code 751. And if you look properly, you will see we have two columns, column 1 and column 2, having T codes in them. Now, the first column simply denotes the old T codes. All right, and the second column denotes the new T codes. So what you see here means that the old T code for CK11 has been changed to CK11N. Yeah, the module here is for costing, not for PM, okay? And this CK11 is a transaction code having a costing description. All right, so all of the CK from CK11 to CK13, CK64, 66, 74. All right. So they are all T codes for costing, and you can see that they have different transaction codes in S4HANA, which is the table on the right. So it simply means that if I input this C code, CK66 on SAP, it will tell me that this particular code does not exist. All right. So let's take an example. If you use the CK42 and CK40N, let's try this so that we can be able to understand what I am talking about. So we're going to go back here, and now let's carry out the transaction CK42 and see what we have. All right, so CK42, this is the old transaction code, and then you execute. Okay, so we're going to try to execute. So you see that it says that the function is not available. So it means that the T code does not exist anymore on ECC. Now let's see the new version for CK42. All right, let's see what we're going to have. So CK40N is the new version for CK42. CK40N. Now let's execute and see what we have. Okay, so this transaction code is the change costing run transaction. Now we see that this one displayed, and the other one tells us that there is actually an issue with the T code. All right, so you actually do not need to have all these 10,000 plus transaction codes on your head. Yes, you can familiarize yourself with your module based on your module, but on the SAP environment, you can know which of them have been changed and which of them have not been changed. Okay, so let's actually see something else. Let's see something else. Now, I can actually know if an individual T code has been changed or not. All right, so on your search button, SE16N, and we execute. So your SAP release code, you input it as 751 as usual. All right, so you go and you click on the filter button. Okay, so when you click on the filter button, it takes you to the column set. So this is our column set. You click on transaction code. All right, and then you go down, you see something looking like define values. You click on your define value. So we want to see if the T code for goods movement MB1A has been changed. So I'm going to click MB1A, type MB1A, all right, and I tick. So this tells me that MB1A has been changed to MIGO. All right, so the goods movement does no longer use the code MB1A anymore, but MIGO. All right, so let's now see if this has really been changed. Let's confirm this on SAP. Okay, so we're going to go back to our home, and we're quickly going to use the search button as usual. So on the search button, I am going to input MB1A. All right, and I'm going to execute it and see what it says. So it says that T code MB1A is obsolete. So it simply means that this particular code does no longer exist. All right, but if I use the new T code MIGO, let's see what we have. MIGO. All right, I execute, and this gives me what I want. So we can now see that right there on the SAP environment, you can know which code has been changed and which code has not been changed. Familiarize yourself with them. To have access to already downloaded SAP transaction codes, I have made reposts on some SAP transaction code posts from SAP experts on LinkedIn. Please find me on LinkedIn and see some of my reposts on transaction codes. Thank you.